there is also an understanding that the Kabbalists have about unreasonable doubt. All such doubt is actually faith, perverted and distorted. Indeed, there can be no such thing as doubt, unreasonable doubt, without faith, if you think about it. In other words, if I say I'm worthless, and you tell me all the reasons you think I'm not worthless, and I persist on saying, but I'm worthless, I doubt my own worth. Come on. Well, then in a sense, that's faith. Faith, if you're clear on faith, faith begins where reason ends, right? And so, faith can be perhaps the most powerful tool that the psyche can muster in extreme instances of hardship. But on the other hand, it can be terribly misleading when misused. Okay. It pays to say a couple of words about faith, just in general, what the Jewish notion of faith is all about. You see, faith is different than belief. Let's get that straight right away. Even though probably in Webster they overlap, but definitely in Hebrew, faith is different than belief. If I tell you that tomorrow morning at this time it's going to be light outside, even though perhaps I can't empirically prove that, anybody who knows the history of this neighborhood at this time of the year, for as far back as it goes, well, they'll tell you it's always been light out at this time of day. So whether I can prove it's going to be light tomorrow at this time or not, empirically really doesn't matter. If I say that, you've got every good reason to believe me. All right? If I told you it was going to be dark out tomorrow at this time, and you accepted that, that would be faith. Faith is not dependent on anything. Faith is a blind leap. In fact, in the deepest sense, faith is the most primal manifestation, at least conceptually, of primordial will, real profound will. Faith is maybe the most profound manifestation of primordial will. Why do I have faith? Because I want to believe that. That's it. Nothing else counts. If faith depends on some sort of evidence or documentation or objective corroboration, then take that away, and I won't believe whatever it is. But faith doesn't depend on anything. So I could be, or somebody could be in the gas chamber in Auschwitz, and they saw their whole family already annihilated, and they're waiting for the gas pellets to fall, and they say, you know, I believe somehow there's purpose behind this suffering. I believe in God. I believe that when those pellets are going to fall, I'm going to go to my death crying out the word Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Is there any reason for that? No. It's a totally unreasonable position. So how can anybody have that kind of faith? Because they want to. That's all. So it's will. So faith begins where reason ends. Now coming back to a less extreme place, understand that Kabbalistically, faith, the image for faith, is the moon. Now the moon has none of its own light. It's cold and it's dark. It does, however, reflect the light of the sun. And so, as we've been describing it, one can easily see how faith is very, very powerful when used correctly. But if a person has faith in ways that are not good, well, then you might wind up having Charlie Manson as your guru, right? So in Judaism, how do you know when to have faith? Well, if you go back to the image that faith has something to do with the moon, and the moon has none of its own light, yet on the other hand, the moon reflects the light of the sun. The light of the sun has to do with intelligence, with wisdom. King Solomon says, Chochmas Odom To'eh Ponav, the wisdom of man sheds light before him. If you say that, if I say I'm enlightened, it means I know something. And so though faith is blind of light, it's empty of light, like the moon, nevertheless it reflects the light of the sun. Putting it slightly differently, I have to know, literally know in my mind, when to stop using my mind. And if I stop using my mind one instant before I should, then I might be misled by faith. Nevertheless, the mind has its parameters, its limitations. There are things that cannot be dealt with on the basis of reason alone. In fact, reason ends at a certain point in certain situations. I have to know that point. My faith, which is blind of reason, nevertheless has to reflect reason. Okay. And so, when faith becomes unhealthy, it ceases to reflect reason. In which case, we have unreasonable doubt. Unreasonable doubt is a kind of, in other words, one of the negative manifestations of unreasonable faith is unreasonable doubt, where I accept something as, I think of something from a doubtful place because I want to, because that's my faith. So it's not possible to have unreasonable doubt without faith. In fact, unreasonable doubt is a perversion of faith. And therefore, in biblical Hebrew, there is no word for doubt, because we don't want to give power to the realm of faith perverted.
Well, that sounds like an Iboya.
What?
That sounds like an Iboya.
No, why is it an Iboya? An Iboya is two reasonable approaches to
I
something.
understand. Well, we're saying that faith starts where reason ends, but if it doesn't reflect reason, it's not really faith.
Right, no, but which way does it reflect? The faith doesn't reflect the reason directly. It's that faith doesn't begin. I don't assume for myself a position of faith until it's reasonable for me to do so. And so when I understand that at this point, reason won't resolve. And so when I understand that at this point reason won't resolve my problem, then I have a right to assume a position of faith. What? Wait. So when we got it there? Okay, so something wrong with that machine? Here you go again. Oh, I tell you, so we get another backup here machine?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just keep going. So when when I realized that reason won't resolve my dilemma, at that point it is reasonable to assume a position of faith.
Does that mean that one is obliged to stretch reason as far as it can possibly go and
No. I like that question. It's a sensitive question. I think there's some place in this all where I can make that transition. I have to instinctively know when it's reasonable to be reasonable. Right? In other words, there's a point where it's kind of unreasonable to be reasonable. So, okay? But you can't know what I'm talking about unless you look at it at the extreme. Faith, in fact, begins where reason ends. But maybe reason should end where it's reasonable for reason to end.
But isn't that the story of Job? I mean, he continued to have faith even when it was unreasonable to have faith.
Well, Job has faith. Well, no. Job has faith exactly right. I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Okay.
In fact, Job has faith where it isn't reasonable. That's exactly what I'm saying. Faith is the strength that one is able to partake of in a place where reason doesn't work. But if we have faith in a place where we should be reasonable, then often the faith will backfire. That's what I'm saying. Cynthia, did you want something?
You said there's no word for unreasonable doubt in Hebrew because they do not want
to lend
power.
What?
Lend power to
To
unreasonable
lend
doubt.
power to this domain of unreasonable doubt, to this concept of unreasonable doubt.
Are you talking about when intellect alone, when the mind alone is not enough, and we rely on a deeper way of knowing than the intellect?
That's right. That would be one thing. Or in other words, but the mind enough is not alone, and the mind is not enough where what we're up against is not a matter of understanding.
Yeah.
Right. We've
Intellectual
exhausted
discourse is not enough.
or even an intellectual approach to something.
Right.
Somebody has a terminal disease, so obviously they take their medicine, do what the doctor says. But, they also realize so that'll keep them alive for another half a year. But maybe they should have, coupled with that, a sense of faith. And of course then you get into a sort of a paradox. Well, this is an aside. But you see, if you've ever, you have to do this all the time, but if you've ever run into people who have beat cancer, let's say, they really beat it, but they were, they came pretty close to dying, and then they beat it. If you question these people, sort of indirectly, you bring it out from them, you'll find, at least my experience is, that every one of these people is going to tell you that at some point they accepted the fact of death. That doesn't mean they wanted to die. It means they were saying to themselves, like, sure, I'd like to live. But if God wants me dead, so be it. And they actually came to accept that. At that point, something happened to them that reversed the situation. But if they were fighting either to die or to live, and they didn't have this sort of integration, the miracle doesn't happen.
Sticking with your metaphor then, at some particular point, it's like the moon throws the switch on the sun, and the sun goes off. And therefore it has to shine with its own light.
The moon in itself has no light.
I understand.
But the moon shows you, the sun shows you where the moon is.
And the moon has
You want to look at it that way. So reason points to the situation where faith has to be utilized.
At some point, you exceed all reason.
Of course, if there is,
It's like turning off the sun.
well, okay, but but then you're totally involved in the moon.
That's right.
But at what point do you know? How do you know when to even?
No, I agree with you. You need
Right.
it's tautology. You need
That's-
the sun to know when to turn the sun off.
Okay, that's good enough.
Or how to accept
That's
the light
fine. That's fine.
Because it isn't available at the same strength all the time. The moon has to accept what's available to it. The moon doesn't make it happen.
Wait.
The light.
Yeah.
The moon has to accept the light that is available given the rotation. It doesn't make anything happen. It's a passive recipient of light, and it might be a full moon or a half
Well,
moon.
actually, you see, that's because you're thinking of the moon as the part that you can see. The rabbis taught that the sun never sees the opposite side of the moon. In other words, there's a kind of, in math, in higher mathematics, you have a what do you call it? What is the go-between dimensions? How do you say that?
Tensor.
What?
A tensor.
No, what is the?
Practical dimension.
There's a way to move the handover. What is the handover from one dimension to the other, right? So you might even argue that there is a handover. There's the sun, and then there's the sun reflected in the moon, and then there's the backside of the moon that has no sun whatsoever.
It's like rational and irrational numbers.
Right. So that in a certain way, we're in a sun that's reasonable. And then it becomes reasonable to contemplate faith. But then when you really get into faith, there's no sun. That's maybe a different way to look at it. Okay.
The trouble is, it's probably an Egyptian metaphor.
Oh no, that's Okay.
So,
Yeah.
we're talking about unreasonable faith.
Faith is not reasonable. Faith is not reasonable, but you may have every reason to adopt the position of faith.
But then what you're also saying is that there are times when it's not reasonable to adopt a position.
That's right. Like, if you want to drink what's in that cup, I don't really suggest that you have faith in God that He's going to raise the cup and put it in your hand, and it's reasonable for you to pick it up. That's the easiest way to get it done, right? So there's times when faith is appropriate, and times when it's simply not appropriate.
You know, what comes to mind is chemotherapy.
Yeah.
There are people who want to move to guided imagery before doing what they can.
Oh no, that's silly. Yeah, that's silly. Yeah, and also the guided imagery also doesn't really. It ain't gonna work unless you accept the fact that you might die, and that's okay.
Yes.
If a person wants to live, but truly accepts the fact of their own death, then they're saying yes to everything.